the different cuts, this the T-bone and this sirloin steak, and the different chops and that sort of thing. And, well, but how would you cook that? Well, Dad knew exactly what temperature to put a prime rib roast and everything else.
Yes.
Those guys take notes to beat the band. And old Ferguson says, "But Joe, you're wasting with those kids." He says, "Some of those girls are going to get married. They're going to be graduating from school. Now," he says, "I don't want them to be coming down here and just buying hamburgers and beers." He says, "Oh, Joe, just cut some meat." Well, he would get some of the wives who wanted to put on some real dog. This crown roast for the lamb. And they take the prime rib. Someone scared to death of a prime rib, 4 or 5 ribs. And he'd to tell them what temperature they're cooking at. It depends upon the poundage. And they'd write it down. Well, they would get it. And so they would turn around and buy the prime rib roast. Along about Monday, after they had their guests on Sunday, "Oh, Mr. Schnurr, dreaming success." Well, try a little lamb next time you get the company. Just spoil it, some down. So he got half the women in town here to buy something besides just plain old cussing. It was very your meals, And but that again, I realized after I got a psychology course, I realized what my dad was doing. When I told Butch Boyer, the psychology department at college, he says, your dad was practicing psychology. And I said, I came back to Dad one time, I said, "You realize what you did? You've been practicing psychology." "God," he says, "I didn't know that." Well, I said, "Butch Boyer thinks that you're a fast master at this." Dad says, "I just call it good business." But it was, he said, but I got such a kick out of it that little Ferguson, he couldn't understand that. I said, "How are you supposed to make? We make money in this meat shop. You don't make it on Weeders, you make it on prime rib roast. A few more things." And these people they want to eat these things, but they're scared of how to cook it. But I don't know how many people he's taught to do that.
You said there was a refrigeration or an ice unit downstairs?
No, it was the old generator. I see you generated the freezing by it had
a compressor?
Yeah, the compressor. What am I thinking about the machine had to compress this thing to generate coldness. And then the coldness was in the pipe, and then of course your walk-in box was walls of these big pipes. And they were always crusted, that was the walk-in cooler. Now these, because they have this thing so much more simplified. But at that time, you had to have an ice machine, and generally it was in a basement room or something. There had to be something close to where you were going to keep the refrigerated meat.
Right.
But with this walk-in, we had a pickle barrel, and we had the cottage cheese came in 40-pound cans, and you took it from the oyster pail, and you filled in a pint or a quarter and that's the way you packaged it at that time. And also we had cabbage. It's not cabbage, the cured cabbage.
Sauerkraut. Yes.
And sauerkraut barrel. If I 55-gallon drum and you did the same thing with the sauerkraut in the
Well, then in the meat market, then he kind of had to help take care of a few other things than just the meat.
Oh yeah, it was truly a meat shop, not just a butcher cutter. Now 90% of the places, everything is prefabricated at the packing house. The guy buys T-bone steaks. He buys them already cut, and everything else. All he does is then pack them. There's a thing called not nitrogen, but there's something now that they have in refrigeration that you can cut and put the meat in there, and in 10 minutes you have instantaneous freezing. Now, if you take slow freezing you are extracting and drawing out the juice. So a refrigerated piece of meat doesn't taste as good as, except if you can instantaneously, it freezes intact.
I see.
So the steaks that you get from the big steakhouses, they cut those, and it's instantaneously frozen, and they put them in 200 and 300 pound boxes. And the store that buys, they buy the T-bones all cut. All they have to do is take it out, sell it to the person, and then he thaws it and puts it on the stove, and it all goes on to the top. But it doesn't evaporate, sitting for months and months in cold storage.
I see.
It's the instantaneous freezing.
The reason I've asked you about this ice machine is because Edgar Renfrew had mentioned when we were talking about the whistle in town, that the whistle was used for fires. And he remembers that one night when they had a fire in the ice house. And so I was curious about how, he was saying the ice house was down by the river. They'd cut the ice in the wintertime and put it in the sawdust.
That's another way of doing it.
Right.
But that's kind of a hard job to try to keep it. You've got to get a chunk if you've got to put enough sawdust around. So it don't melt. It don't melt anyway, but it won't be able to stack.
Well, I was kind of curious how a fire would start in the ice house. And so I'll have to ask you.
And then that brings up another point. One night at the slaughterhouse out there, Dad and I were killing the animals again, and they were all up on the rail, and the next morning they sent them out for the truck. So they were, during the night, they were in the full funnel, hanging there. But of course, the body is jelly, it's hardening.
Right.
But it's not cut into except in the carcass part. So at the daytime when they bring it down. But we left the slaughterhouse and we're coming back home here, and every one of these spots in town where there's a fixture to turn into you turn the key, broke the glass and turned in the key.
Oh yes.
And that said that the fire is somewhere near where that particular terminal was.
Right.
So if it was on Cedar Street, on Cedar and 6th, if there was one of those things there, that tells the people that there was 36, bing, bing, bing 3 times, then bing, 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 bing 6 times. Everybody in town, if he looks at his chart, well, it's somewhere near 3rd and or Cedar Street and 6th. Well, anyway, we're coming into town, and here's the damn thing. The noise, the bells are. And so it's got to be up here on Potlatch or Cedar, up about 7th or 8th Street, that there's a house on fire there. All right, here we are already. Now there were a lot of these hose carts all over town. The hose cart was there when the first thing. So the first thing a fireman did was head for where the spot was, get that thing up there, and then somebody would haul it with a truck. Well, we went right to the spot, and we're there because we were already in a car coming right down the 6th. Went over to the spot, and the house was open to get to the hose. Dad had a hook on the back of the car. We got the hose hooked up, and we pulled it over, and the first fireman showed up. God, he says, I'm glad. So we were just Johnny on the spot, and we got there faster, because the element of stopping a fire is the crippling to it. So, but everybody in town knows well, that fire thing went up. We all became conscious, because this town was wood. And if the town ever got a real bad fire, and we never really had a real bad fire, I know. There was a lot of little houses.
Well, then at each of those fire alarms or whatever they were, they would ring at that.
And the buzzer down there would activate the mill horn. The mill horn roar. You could hear it 4 miles away. You could hear Princeton. You could hear that there was a fire in Filename, because this is what you do, you alert
Sure.
people damn quick.
Sure.
And,
So you knew by the number of rings
Yeah.
where the fire was.
By your chart, you know.
I see.
And I gotta tell you another thing about that. They had a whistle. And for the crew that were to come to work at 8 o'clock, they had to whistle, I think, at 6:30. And you know what they call that whistle? They call it the stimulus to the improving, the progeny of the city. A lot of people decided just about 2 seconds and took another few minutes before they got up. And he said more babies were born because of that damn whistle. It woke them up just. If they were of such a mind, why that was it. They look. So this was something else we did in Potlatch. We had a whistle that caused the population to expand consistently.
I see.
Another thing in Potlatch, we, except for the warehouses and except for the laird, everybody, the only major was you lived a little bit bigger house, a little bit better house. But about that, but your houses were not all that much better than anybody else. It would maybe be a little bigger. But if you had a better job, why, that's your entitled to it because you've got the better job anyway. But one thing about the town is they had what they call a town site. The town site were the plumbers and the painters and all these people, electricians, every conceivable thing, and they were in the middle. All right. Periodically, they'd come down on Cedar Street, 2 blocks, and they would come to each house. What would you like to have your house? What color do you want to paint? You've got yellow and green and brown and red, and so the woman could make up her mind. So they'd say, well, 625 is going to have a red house. So in due course, the paint crew would just come along, and one day when we people got there, and here, boy, there's Johnny on that house. And they got about 3 guys out there banging at the house paint. Well, let's say if you got plumbing, well, the company had all this. A lot of people didn't realize how expensive it was going to be to get out on their own and then have to buy their own paint and do their own high. But we got that for free. I mean, that was part of the thing. And now you put your name in all the time. If you found a house that you wanted, if somebody had left that house and nobody else had needed your name, well, that house is available. And that's how Dad got the gamble out. Waited for about 4 or 5 years until it became, the gamble said, well, I'm retired, I'm going to go east or something. So that's how we got that house.
When did your father retire from the meat market?
Well, see, he had 50 years, so from 27 to 77.
Okay.
He had 27 to 57, I think. He had 30 years, I think. And then I think he...
Because I believe the Merck burned in the 60s, 62, something like that.
Yeah, well, it was prior to that time. Because he was long out of there. He used to come around when he was in his 70s, and they needed vacation support, stuff like that.
I see.
But Dad continued to live here, because where else would he go? We got our house here and everything else. And when the company sold those houses, they sold those houses for a song, because by God, those houses had been in depreciation, had been depreciated all. It had a zero cost basis. So anything in the middle of God was 100% of velvet, tax one. And he bought that gamble house up there with $4,000. And he said, my God, he says, $4,000. He said, we can't afford not to buy it. Because it was an 8-room house, and at that time it had steam heater. It was one of those steam heated houses. They eventually took the steam heated houses off of the ones on the hill there, and the only thing else was the high school, the grade school, the church. Those had steam. The rest of it was that damn pipe coming up from the mill. It was kind of tough to try to keep it insulated from the sawmill down there to these various spots in town. Unless you buried it, and you didn't bury it, you had to keep it above ground. So it was kind of a non-entities. But that mob decided that, well, they wanted that house, and they gave it to him.
Did Potlatch give them a pretty good retirement? Do you know at all if they?
Yeah, Dad had the Potlatch retirement plan, and I don't remember now, but at the time what he had, together with Social Security, just put him not, he wasn't without, it was about 10, 15 years later, right, before he really got into a little more desperation. I mean, it wasn't increasing as fast as the cost of living was going up.
Right.
But, no, he couldn't complain about that. And then your health plan, you see, Dad had good coverage with that, and that was, I think, $2 a month or something like that, you know. And hell,
when he retired?
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, till we could have that plan. And of course, they if you were not covered, but this covered all the men in town that had a job in the mill.
Did they automatically get a retirement, or did they have to contribute some?
Yeah, they had to qualify for the number of years. And if they, I don't know if they ever made any exceptions to the rule or something. But this building here, they were maintaining a town as well as just the mill. So this is what they said the main office. I mean, God himself was up on that third floor. But I got to tell you about Laird. When Dad first came over here, apparently Mrs. Laird had a comment. She'd heard a comment made by somebody in the meat shop about that she was a little old woman and not talking very nice about it. And so he says, P.W. Laird, he says, you're under a butcher. And he says, have you dealt with my wife yet? And my dad says, well, yes. He says, this is Laird. She's a very congenial, nice lady, and we had a kind of visit. I just wondered, he says, because they used to give her, say she was a little uppity or something. Dad said, well, I got she wasn't uppity of me. She's just as nice as she could be. So A.W. Laird, he never heard about anything bad about that. But if you were creating a fuss, and it became enough people would report to the company, pretty soon the thing would come around and they would investigate. So when they kicked you out, mister, they kicked you out. You were on can, you're given a notice that your house is to be vacated, and you were given time to get out.
Did Laird have any children?
I can't remember what they did. I don't remember when they did.
I'm sure you would have probably known.
The Humistons, they had a son that was Malcolm and Ed Renfrew's age, and the house of Gamble, we call the Gamble house, that's that last one on the street there. There was, the Gamble girl was in high school when I was in grade school, and so I knew of her. She's the one that she called up, somebody called her up, and she wanted to get a hold of Gladys Puckett or something. She says, I know that she's over at somebody else's house. You can get traced down in Potlatch just by your person knows, well, they called it on the phone that, so a lot of times you were contacted by a party before the original party got to you, somebody else had already told you. Yeah, I understand you're looking for me. So that was getting a casual situation of Potlatch.
Did you know anyone outside of Potlatch? How did people outside of town feel towards the company and their policies? You know?
Well, I never heard many people say about it, but I noticed a hell of a lot of people that never came here didn't leave. So I think that speaks for it. But no, this is company town. I wouldn't like to live there. Well, there's benefits that the company gave that other towns wouldn't give. So I think the first month or two here, you say, well, they're pretty nosy. But when you begin to see how well you were being taken care of, and you got over this animosity, let the company do it. The company is to me, it impressed me when they put $40,000 of the lights down, that's the guys who play softball. Or where they had a full-time athletic director here to program for the men working in town. See, so we don't want you to drink in town, but we also want you to keep busy. By God, we'll let you work. This is boxing or doing baseball.
How about the people that lived outside of town, though? I mean, like the farmers in the area or the people in Onaway?
No, there wasn't any hassle there because you see all the damn kids, Princeton, Harvard, there were half dozen kids from Harvard down here in high school, and from Princeton, and some of them from Onaway walked over, and the farm kids out here would come in at the farm. At that time there was the school buses, and so you either hoofed it or you had connections of it. But no, Potlatch, I had to be away from it completely to realize what a nice guy went to town it was. Different. But that's, as I said, I just felt that said, somebody should know this. I mean, some people should be make comments about it. And the fact, like this connection with the Japanese and there was what was his name? I got it written down here. Waldemar. Now, Waldemar, he was the Yugoslavian. Waldemar. Everybody charged their groceries and meat, and I had bad times with that. And finally one day I said, let's spell this out. And so I wrote it right on the wall above the telephone. Waldemar. O-L, and there was about a lot of Y's and U's and everything else. And it pleased him no end. My God, he says, and I go, Mr. Waldemar, oh, he would smile. But you didn't draw anything different about the I think it's an advantage to live in a town where you were that way, and that way in school too.
Did Setsu Matsura come back and finish his college education?
I think that he probably went to the GI Bill and probably took his dental one. He was dentist.
Oh,
yeah.
I see.
Yeah, I think he went to dental school afterwards. Because he got his pre-med thing there at college. So he was the same shape I was, and we were at the, I know there was a year ahead of him, or maybe a half a year ahead of him. But Setsu, no, he was in the modern role getting in. With the grades I had here, I was on the honor roll. Practically every time.
Yes, you should have been.
But I attribute that to good teachers. Of course, my Malcolm and Edgar, they were, when they were in high school, I envied them. Then about the time they got to over to college, well then I got to go to college. And so I was just the next generation. But we had the inspiration, you might say. Dad says, I don't want you, he said, I want you to look at me something. He said, I don't want you to be a butcher. But he said, it wouldn't hurt to know something about it.
Sure.
And so I was able to make that. I had an advantage over a kid that could make 25 cents an hour to make 50 cents an hour. And leaving on the campus over there, I was a plutocrat at 50 cents an hour. I dated a girl who was getting 25 cents an hour for working in the reserve library. Only about 2 days a week. So fortunately, she took her money most of the time, and she bought the picture show tickets when I didn't have enough money. But,
well, where did you live when you went over to the University of Idaho?
Well, I was Lamb for 3 years, and then I left it on the 4th year, and I should have left it about the 2nd year, because my grades got better on the 5th year, that last semester, because I jumped from 209, 167, 253, 280. And the last one, 3.14. You see what happens when you're not in fraternity, you're not wasting your time. I shouldn't have gone into fraternity to begin with, because it was costing too much money, and I could have been cheaper even then. But,
well, I sure thank you, Mr. Schnurr. This has really been wonderful.
Well, I'll give you a lot of...
I
No, what do you want here? Anything or anything?